Good morning, everybody. So welcome to the interview section of this meeting. I'm delighted this morning to be introducing Natalie Allsop from Engaging Content, and we're going to talk about her expertise, and she's going to give us some ideas around how businesses can perhaps think about some of the things she does. So Natalie, why don't we start with you giving us a slightly longer introduction than people.
Yes, absolutely. So as I said before, I run Engaging Content, which is a blend of an agency and also sort of teaching and coaching and mentoring, I guess. But my thing that I'm very passionate about is the human side of marketing and blending that with the computer side. So having been in digital marketing for 20 years, my background was very much with web design, being a web designer, and I started sort of life in the corporate world. And then I set up an agency and was creating websites for clients for many, many years. And but I got very frustrated with the fact that my clients were expecting me to create the content for their websites. And so there was this disconnect with their expectations of what they were getting from me. And so kind of fast forward a few years, I started working with SEO people to help bring the two elements together, and obviously copywriters. But the point is that there are so many websites out there that I guess exist, but aren't necessarily performing to their best potential. And also there's quite a lot of education probably needed around SEO for small businesses. So I suppose I help businesses to connect with their audience on a deeper level with content through their website.
So we're going to explore the area of content marketing and some of the areas that you cover. So we know that the area of content marketing is really, really huge for all businesses. It's something that we see everywhere, that everybody talks about. And for many businesses, it can be really, really overwhelming in terms of, producing it, getting it out there. We know AI is coming along and potentially changing people's perception of how easy that is. But within this large subject area, what would you say is your key area of expertise that you and your team specialise in?
So it would be in the kind of content strategy and the foundations of content, because that's often the part that is missed. So as I said before, people struggle to write about themselves. I find it hard to write about my business. It's not easy. There is a skill to it. And I think that's where most of the disconnect comes, is that they haven't figured out their messaging and their strategy of their content.
And so do you work with a team? Is it just you, or have you got several other people working with you?
Yeah, so I have a web developer who still does the doing. I don't do the doing in that sense anymore. And also copywriters who will, so I tend to focus more on the kind of strategy and mapping out. So for example, with blogs, which is, your website being a channel in itself, blogging isn't dead. Blogging is still very much alive. And so I would help businesses to come up with the content strategy and then what blogs and sales pages and so forth they would need. And then if they want help creating that, we can do that. My copywriter is an SEO copywriter. And also we can do some of the heavy lifting on websites as well. But yeah, it's mostly that strategy, that foundation piece.
So when you're looking at strategy, part of what you're thinking about the SEO part of it as well. So it's not just producing the content, but how on the website is that going to help with engagement and driving traffic and all those sorts of things, yeah?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So it only occurred to me very recently that when I was doing my degree many, many moons ago, I did multimedia and computing. That was what my degree was. And my favourite module was human-computer interaction. I just was so fascinated by that module. And so now when I think about what I'm doing, it's quite ironic because it is exactly that. It's that interface between the human and the real side of marketing, but then also making it work for websites and the robots and AI as as we're finding out. So yeah, that's what I think sort of sets me apart a little bit, because with all due respect to web developers, often they can be quite very technical and not very good at explaining things, which is fine, and I'm not bashing them at all, but there is this piece in the middle that needs explaining in a really easy to understand way, and I think that's the bit I really love.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday and they were talking about part of their role was being a translator between the end user and the technical people, because
yeah, that's nice.
A completely different language, and tends to sort of do that, doesn't it, in terms of understanding and things. So tell us, for your business, who is your absolute sweet spot as an ideal client?
So I would say that actually it's smaller service businesses who don't necessarily have the budget to outsource SEO services because it is expensive. But I think the bigger issue is that it's such a massive topic. It is like another language. And so if they do work with a business, I've seen for myself that there is this problem where they don't really understand it. They don't understand what they're getting. They're not seeing the results. Their expectations aren't being managed. So that's the bit I want to change, is to try and bring SEO to a wider audience so they can learn it, grow their business, then outsource it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So you're not industry specific or location specific or anything. It is people with this particular problem statement, isn't it, really?
It is, but definitely more on the service business side rather than product. I mean, to be honest, SEO for product businesses is very similar, but it's just I don't do as much e-commerce. I just prefer to stick to the service side. But yeah, apart from that, I guess I can work with anybody, but it tends to be, as I say, smaller businesses, maybe businesses that don't have a big team or don't have a team at all. But that's not to say that I don't work with bigger businesses. Their need is usually more training, where they have a team and they want them to understand more about SEO in relation to their business and their website and their goals. So, yeah.
So when you get a new client coming on board, what's the process that you go through in terms of getting them to the point of doing their own SEO or learning more, but also, how do you get the brief? How do you make sure they understand what it is they're trying to do? Is that an ongoing process? Is it just a quick 2-hour meeting, or how does that work?
Yeah, so whether they want to learn it for themselves, or whether the training, or we're doing it for them, it's still the same process. So I kind of call it the problem you solve, because I feel like there's an awful lot of talk around ideal customer, which is absolutely right. You need to know who your audience is, not a problem. But there's too much focus on, well, who are they and what do they look like and where do they dine out and where do they hang out online and all of this stuff, which is necessary, but it's too far down the road than where they are. So I take them back a step, and we talk about the problem that they solve, which is going to be the same problem pretty much. I solve the same problem for different ideal customers. So I go deep with them, and out of that kind of workshop, it's a half a day really. I ask tons and tons of questions. And it's kind of trying to tap into the subconscious of their ideal client, of what they're thinking, feeling. And then out of that comes so many content ideas, thought reversals, using your experience, your empathy, to be able to then feed that back into your content and meet them where they're at. Because often in marketing, we're trying to talk to them further down the road of, well, we do this and we do that. It's like, no, meet them where the problem is, where they're struggling, where they can't move forward. And I'm getting really good success and feedback from this approach.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? I was talking to actually Heather, who was hoping to join us this morning, and we were saying that quite often, because they run a marketing agency, we find quite often that businesses really sort of start their marketing in the middle.
They do.
Yeah, so they want to start their marketing and they want to get their stuff out there, but they haven't done that base stuff to actually understand, you know, what problem it is they solve, what's their value proposition, what is it they're really offering, what do they want the customer journey to look like. You know, then you can craft your messages and your channels and make that more effective. But businesses seem to start in the middle a lot. I think because there's a lot of pressure from, if you like, the marketplace to get your marketing out there. So everything must be marketing. But that prep time is so crucial. And so having that conversation with you, even if they decide not to go ahead to work with you, is a very useful exercise to go through. Just encapsulate their thoughts, isn't it, really?
Yeah, because they will get a website set up because it feels like they're in business. I've got something to show now, but actually a website's just a tool. You know, it's the content is the fuel of the website. And so if you haven't got that content bit figured out, it is literally like having a lovely flash car on the drive with no fuel in it. You can't take it anywhere. It's just not doing anything. And so that's where I meet a lot of people where they're at, which is they have a website and it's not performing. And so then to help them, we have to go back a step to align those issues.
And what would you say to people that say they've had their website built and it's done?
A website's never done. Because, you know, a business is never done. A business is always evolving. It's a journey, not a destination. It's exactly the same with your website. That's why it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, it can be good enough, but you need to be updating it. You need to be putting fresh content, blogs out there, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's not one and done. Having said that, there are of course businesses that don't need to necessarily be found online. They don't need leads coming to them, and so their website is a glorified business card, a showcase. I still would say, well, you know, if you're going to go to the effort and cost of having a website, then have it set up properly, you know. But mostly people want their website to be found online, and they feel like their website has failed when it's not being found online.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I know, you know, talking to some of our members and clients over the years, you know, there are a few of them that really they don't need a website because every single bit of their business is word of mouth. They don't go networking. It's all referrals and introductions, and the website really is there as a portfolio for anybody that wants to look at it. And really, arguably, they could almost do that on a LinkedIn page or something instead, because it is literally just some examples. But they're not using it to generate business at all because they don't need to. So, but you're right. Even then, you need to think about, you know, how you built it and the common sense of having it so it performs in some way, don't you? So.
And also, you know, you're saying about who do we work with? We work with people that have been in business, have an offer that they're selling.
Yeah.
And want to amplify that. So if it's a brand new business and I can get to them first, I would say you don't need a website. Have a Google My Business page, whatever it's called now. George was saying about local search. It's just so important to get your local search set up. And maybe just a landing page in MailerLite.
Yeah.
Start growing your email list. And that's all you need. You don't need to go to all this expense until you know who your ideal customer is and you know what your offer is and what you're selling.
Yeah, precisely. I think we used to do a lot of work with Start and Grow Enterprise down at the university. And that was businesses less than 3 years old, and quite a lot of them, you know, in 6 months in. And they were all adamant they needed a website and they needed to be on Facebook. And it's like, yeah, but is that really where you want to be starting? You know, we need to start earlier in the process than that. So within...
That is the main issue with new businesses, is feeling, and this is the bit I want to change, is I haven't quite figured that out yet, but you don't need that to prove you're in business. A LinkedIn profile, Facebook page, you know, is adequate. But I think it's that confidence of feeling like they've got something tangible to show. So I totally agree that they'll spend their budget on a website when they could be spending it on actually the foundations.
Yeah, precisely. I think that's the key thing, isn't it, really? So within the area of SEO, content and websites, if there were 5 things that businesses should know, what would they be?
So, first of all, if you have a website, is it visible in the search engine? So yes, it's live, it's showing in the browser, that's all great, but can Google and all the other search engines actually find it? Because how search engines work, and I like to liken this to having a book from the library. If that book isn't indexed in their database, you can't take that book away to read it. And in the same way, if your website isn't showing in Google's database and indexed, then you're never going to be able to rank for any keywords. So the first point of call is to check how visible your site is. You can do a really quick check. You can go into Google, you put site, colon, and then your web address, all no spaces, and it will show you what is indexed. And it will also show you your titles and meta tags as well, which probably need work. So that's number one, is to check how visible it is. And the second, I suppose, meta tags and titles kind of are grouped into that. The second thing is links. Links on your site are how Google understands how the content works together. So you've got cluster content with, say, a blog at the very top that goes deep on that touches on all the topics, and then you go into each topic. So those linking within and back to sales pages, etc., is really important, but also not to overcomplicate it. Don't go too deep with your links. And then links coming to your site, backlinks, because backlinks are how Google trusts you. And it's like, I like to give analogies, it's like when I'm looking for a carpet cleaner and Jill says to me, oh, I've used this brilliant local company. I trust them more because Jill's had a good experience, and so therefore I don't necessarily do my due diligence on looking into them. And it's the same way. If your website URL appears on other websites, that back and Google trusts that other website, that is giving it a huge boost back. So number two is links. Number three is user experience first. So we've got two stakeholders. We've got the user, the prospect, and we've got the robots, but always write for the user. So if you're trying to keyword stuff and trying to, don't do that. Just write as naturally as you possibly can. So user first and also mobile first, because that is what Google will base rankings on, is if your site isn't working on mobile, then you're in trouble because it's going to affect your visibility. So number three is user and mobile. Number four is site speed. Right. So site speed is so important. It depends on your platform. It depends on the code going on behind the scenes. But if you can speak, usually it's images that are the problem. So image compression is important. But yeah, site speed very much is going to affect your rankings if it's slow. You've got like 3 seconds to impress somebody. And people online are very fickle. We just want the information like that. And if we can't get it, and I guess that links to user experience, because if they get to the site and it's taken ages to load, and then the content there is not what they were expecting, they're going to just bounce straight off again. And then the final one, I guess, is the platform. I see a lot of people setting up Wix and all these Squarespace sites, and they're really good starting point. Unfortunately, they kind of limit your SEO efforts further down the line because they just make SEO so much harder. I liken that to Squarespace and Wix, etc. It's like living in a block of flats and you're sharing all the communal areas. Whereas if you have a WordPress website and you're hosting it, it's like buying a piece of land and building a house on it. You have a lot more control. You have a lot more, you've got your own front door, as it were. So I find that platforms can be a problem when it comes to SEO. So yeah, they're the 5 things.
Fantastic. Okay. So you wouldn't recommend people stuffing it with keywords and then hiding the keywords by changing the colour of the text and things, which I've seen people advocate doing, so they end up with these white spaces that are actually full of content because they're trying to persuade the bots to.
Which now is sort of seen as black hat, but back in the day, I guess there was a place for that. but not anymore, because it is so much more about just writing for the user and just sharing your expertise and so forth.
What about the importance of things like SSL certificates and having your privacy policy visible on the site? Does Google care about
that? Google cares about SSL, definitely. If you don't have that, it's going to impact again on your rankings. Privacy policy, you're not, I often, I say to my members, don't worry about that page being indexed, because you'd have something called crawl budget. So Google won't crawl every part of a page, won't crawl every single page on your site. So therefore, if you get the important stuff at the top, so I would say don't index, privacy policies, cookie policies, stuff like that. That's more for, user reassurance.
User trust, isn't it, really? Well, compliance as well. Minor detail. Question for you, and I know we discussed this when we were chatting the other day. How quickly should your customers expect results, and how quickly do they expect results?
So this is the burning question, because if you pay for ads, your website appears straight at the top. But as soon as you stop paying for those ads, it disappears. SEO is a long game. It's not an instant fix, but it really is worth the effort, because I like to liken it to bamboo, having had a bad experience with bamboo. So, planting the bamboo, thinking, oh, this isn't really working, it's not taking.
Let's clarify, we're talking about the plant, not the company, because of course there is a company called Bamboo Tech locally. So.
Oh, right. No, the plant in my garden, it's still an issue. And of course, it's developing all its underground roots and really getting the foundations sorted. So by the time it does start to grow, it just goes bloody wild. And in a positive way, that's like SEO. So it takes time. There's lots of little moving parts. It's little and often. And then by putting that effort in and trusting the process, it will come good and as long as you're creating the blog content going forward, it will come good in the end. And to the point, because you've got to remember that, say with ads, you've got traffic and you've got conversion. So if you're driving traffic from ads to a site, that isn't going to convert because you haven't done the user journey, you haven't thought about the content, you haven't thought about your messaging, you're basically throwing money out the window. So I would say it's better to start with organic. So get your website converting through organic SEO, and then boost it through ads once you know that that's actually good.
And obviously depending what your product and services as well. So I think in there's a warning to people to be wary of people that promise to get them to the top of the Google rankings within a month or something, because unless they're going to pay a lot of money around advertising, doesn't sound as though it's something that could happen, really.
I mean, I've had some really good results with local search, having your website optimized properly. You can actually get really quick results, but you need to know what your keywords are. You need to have done that foundation bit. So yeah, I mean, I had somebody who I got to the top of Google within 3 months, but that's not necessarily saying she's then converting. So there's I would say 6 months is a good rule of thumb. So maybe 3 to 4 months to get some quick wins, and then 6 months to 12 months for it to really take off, which is what puts people off.
Yeah.
But that's the truth of it.
That's the way it is, yeah, absolutely. And so one final question before I hand over to Louise for the next interview. What's the biggest change coming along that's likely to impact your particular area of expertise? Is it AI or is it other things?
I would say AI, but in a really positive way. I don't see it as a negative at all. There's all this talk about, what a copywriter's going to do and people are going to be going out of business. No, because AI is giving, and AI has been around for so long. This ChatGPT isn't just really, So I would say that I'm excited about it because it helps make content creation so much quicker. But, and here's the big but, you need to make sure that you are using first-hand experience in your content to differentiate. So if you're mapping out a blog with ChatGPT, you need to go back and reword it and put it into your tone of voice and your messaging, and you need to put in, because in marketing terms we always talk about social proof, we always talk about showing case studies and things that will back up that we can do what we say we can do. So that's just going to be more important than ever. And like when we were talking, human connection, you know, you can't fake that, can you? So I think, I actually think that AI is going to be really, really exciting. And there's just a final thing to kind of put on your radar. Google has something called EEAT, which is experience, authoritativeness and trustworthiness. So when Google's assessing your website for rankings, it's kind of putting it through that filter. They've now added another E, so it's EEAT, and that other E is experience, because, so did I say experience before? Expertise and experience. So putting your experience into it is going to be more important, because Google will be looking for plagiarized content and then not ranking you. So that would be my one thing to take away, is really focus on making it your own, making that content your own.
I would agree. It's that human element of the editing and the tone of voice and things that AI will get better at, but even AI itself admits it will never completely replace that. So the copywriters are going to be busy doing the thing that's most interesting, which is actually the editing and strategy.
Right. Yeah.
Could you do us all a favour and drop you that way of checking your website, the site code?
Yes.
Put that in the chat box, and I'll include it on the information that we send out after the meeting, so everybody's got that, so they can have a look and see, you know, what's happening with their sites.
Yeah, so I'll pop it in, you get a free SEO score and how well your site's performing. And as the people that have turned up today, if you take that, my gift to you is I will actually do you a free video walkthrough of what it actually means for your website.
Fantastic. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that a lot.
Okay.
So we've got time probably just for one question. If anybody's got a question they would like to ask Natalie, if they can just physically raise their hand, if I can see the whole screen. Okay, fantastic. Louise, over to you for the second interview, please.
Thank you, and thanks, Natalie. That was some really useful tips that I've been writing down, and I'm going to go and check my website. Right then, so our next interview is who's in the room with Craig. So welcome, Craig. So first of all, Craig, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and a bit more about yourself and about your business? How long has it been going? What does it do, etc.?
If I may just indulge, good morning. Natalie, thank you. I live from a business perspective in Natalie's world, but probably on the tech side. It's not necessarily about building the website, more so than in that process of digital transformation and getting people to understand these things is a huge minefield. I also come from a marketing background and have moved into tech later on. But certainly everything Natalie says about people's engagement with technology is a very interesting process. And I'll tell you a little bit about our business now, but we've gone on a very strong drive into our own markets, looking at the relationship with man and machine, as it were. And it's amazing when you engage with people how the barrier to entry and how people relate to digital transformation and all the buzzwords, including all the website stuff, is an interesting process. And to get them past that point of actually deciding to work with you, they know you can do something to help their businesses and streamline things. That jump sometimes is very difficult. And we've had to change the way we do business, and I'll chat about that just now, rather than the user interface is a great word, UX. You know, we have developers on the front end of our business that are very involved in building the tech, but they don't really understand the digital journey. Natalie does, and that's the world I come from. I got into tech from building digital journeys to more on a marketing perspective. probably earlier than the days of ChatGPT and where we're going with TikTok and all those things. And I'm not in the social media space at all. So a little bit, I've digressed a little bit about our business. Our business is long-standing. I have a legacy agreement with an existing partner who's busy retiring now. Digital development and the work we've done over the last 30 years has produced Elephant, not necessarily elephant in the room, but this large piece of software that solves a lot of problems. Originally in the eventing and showground space, but as it grew into, or morphed organically into, a number of management platforms that are able to streamline really what you do in your business. Single entry, streamlined process, large database management brought back to the front end. And I'm using big words here, but what it really is to take a look at your business, see where it really hurts you, and see how we can streamline that process into a workflow that is quick and easy and understandable for perhaps your staff or perhaps yourself as a business owner. I think that's the best way of doing it. I'm trying to be as generic as possible. We do quite a lot of work in the events industry, but we certainly then also do work for customers. I have a customer that rents out toilets. I mean, it sounds crazy, but managing a toilet at an event is always a messy business, for want of a pun. And he has a retention clause with council and the owners of the event, and if he doesn't produce a document that says they were cleaned at these times, and you all know, you go to a restaurant, you go to the loo, and on the back of the door is a piece of paper that somebody signed 15 minutes ago that cleaned the loo, but it doesn't really look like it's been cleaned for the last half a day. So these are the problems people have, and if you take that and manage his staff who are cleaning and digitize the process, you are able to provide a reporting mechanism that he can take to council and get his retention fee paid back. So it's crazy. But the same concept works if you were managing a group of hospitals and you were doing the facilities management. Hospitals have loos, I suppose. They need toilets. They need toilet paper. Hospitals have all kinds of things. The same applies to all businesses that are looking to stream their workflows into something a lot more easy and a lot more manageable, with, of course, reporting platforms on top of that. Everybody these days wants feedback. They want a report. It seems to be our life at the moment is about building dashboards for easy access to information. We all do that. So I don't know if that answers the question. We're quite broad-based. We used to be in the event tech space, but we're now doing things for emergency services, Ministry of Defense, police, and even in the healthcare sector. And that's looking at people's work situations and how they work with what they do and how they deliver. And certainly that's exactly what Natalie was saying, and how we can bring them closer to making it a lot easier for them. That's what we do. So we solve problems all the time. It's a best way of describing it. So I don't know if that answered your question. Natalie threw me on a complete different tack. It was amazing because the whole conversation was about, yes, that's exactly how the world works, you know, and I take the tech step and have to I work with lots of people like Natalie that think they're doing the right thing, but they're on the wrong track altogether.
Yes.
Okay.
So can you give me, I mean, you've already given this example with the toilet roll, but what are there any other sort of examples that you can give us?
Well, yeah, I'll give you some great anecdotes. Besides, we found two things. One thing I found in the industries, all the industries we go into, people have this barrier to using technology, and they just sit with third-party systems. In our world, sort of Microsoft is a competitor. It might sound crazy, but in the database side, they are. But they like to use systems, but what they do is they choose a CRM system or they choose a third-party system and they work with it. But things are organic and they grow, and they usually outgrow those systems. And you can't phone Microsoft up and say, can you please change this form for me? Because I do it in a different way. You know, so going back into systems that are organic and that you can change and you own, and you have your own front door and your own plot. That Natalie, thank you. again, is exactly the same way as you approach using technology in your own business and how you make things change. So give you an idea, I was approached by a company that supports emergency services and said, the government, our current government, is wanting to talk about 20,000 police being added to the system. They need to be more visible policing based on things that are happening, especially for sexual offences and things like that in the space. But the problem police forces have is the courts are sending low-grade offenders home because it's cheap to let the community look after the offender rather than keep them in a G4S jail and have to pay them and feed them. What that does is it sends low-grade tagged offenders back into the community, which have to be managed. The courts give them precincts and times, pretty much like parolees are given a space they have to report to, but those people have to be managed. And they don't have the workforce. And what's happening is 60% of the time for a generically across a police station in a county or a county police force are running around managing people that aren't where they should be. Meant to be at home at a particular time, they're in the pub or at the football ground, or they're doing whatever, or they take the tag off and put it on their kid and looks like they're at home. So they came to us and said to us, we need to fix this. And we said, well, that's simple. So they said, what do you mean simple? For us, it's not. And really what, to give you an idea, is we built a digital platform which they're testing at the moment, which is using an onboarding and AI of the individual on board the tagged offender, put him into a precinct. You can use things like what 3 words, we all know what that is. It can ring fence you, geo ring fence you as they talk. You've got an IP on the phone. You've got biometrics with fingerprints you can do on a mobile phone, and then you build in a voice and visual in the same space. So suddenly you're triaging this individual across 6 key points. You take that information on a random outreach on an SMS at any time. You know he's at home. You know it's him. You know it's fingerprints. You voice and visualed him, and you stick it onto the police incident board, which they call Storm. And the police can see all the outreaches of the people that have been tagged as red, amber, and green, depending at what state or how many of the 6 triages they've passed. Sounds like a lot of hard work, but actually it's a very simple process of managing people. And we do exactly the same thing in all the industries we do, especially in the events industry. Every event has people and it has a precinct. Can't have an event if it's not in some place. It doesn't matter what event it is, whether it's a festival or an exhibition or a conference. And what we do is very specifically, how do we manage the people in an RSVP management process? How quickly can we process them and have all their information and pass it back in a real-time dynamic way to the event owner? And similarly, when we bring them on the site or they arrive at the site or we get them to the site, how do we pass as much information to them as simply as possible, get them there, manage them, and point them in the right spaces, either the seat or the hospitality suite or wherever we want them to be. And of course, using the digital process, we add all the other entitlement to it. So it could be cashless vouchers, if that might be what it is, or food vouchers if you're managing marshals for the process, or similarly, it's your parking voucher is all included in that management system. So we look very specifically at how we scrutinize and squeeze those things into something as simple as possible. And yes, AI sounds like a big word, but it's quite fun to work with, and it's quite easy to bring that into the system. I hope that also answered your question.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So why should they choose your business rather than your competitors?
We're flexible. And I think that's an interesting word. It's easy to say we're flexible. We have this sort of mantra that code can change the world, and we're very strong on the development side on our back end. And we have some very, very, very smart people in the business. They're not all here. They're pretty much scattered all over the world. But similarly, because we work on the user interface front end, in other words, my engagement with customers is about solving problems and pain points that they have, and that's a strong skill that I bring to the process of understanding how the software needs to turn out in the digital journey. But on the back end, we have all the power of the big database management system, the big engine. So if you have an engine on the back that you have a control of, an enterprise database that you are able to manipulate. And we work with an international company from America called InterSystems. InterSystems is one of the largest and fastest database systems in the world. It's used by Obama Healthcare, the Pentagon, the American military, NASA star programs, and it runs Ministry of Defense and for instance, it runs NHS here. So it's a powerhouse. And their philosophy is they don't provide this database to end user, they provide it to solution providers. So they have 4,500 solution providers around the world, of which we are a registered one and have been working on the database almost for 30 years. So we understand how it works. And that power of being able to have control of your data on the back end and the engine that drives what is your user experience on the front, whether it just be your website and your blog or whatever activation or outreach you're using the software for, it gives you massive flexibility in being able to do things the customer wants rather in a bespoke way. So although people say, oh, a bit of bespoke hardware, a bit of bespoke software, excuse me, or I need to build a native app because I want it in the app store, and everybody says, I wanted to build an app, and I hear this all the time. Wow, the guy quoted me £100,000 to build an app. It's going to take 6 months. Well, our best is built an app in 7 days. So big difference in being able to power up that process and understand it. And although the customer said to me, I don't have £100,000, I said, I'll build it for 20, but it's going to get a life of its own. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, we need to put a little bit of contingency on the end, because I know once you start working with it, you're going to say, but what if I can do this? And what if I can do that? And it's exactly where we are. We built it in probably 10 days and it was working, but I'm 3 months down the line with him now and he just keeps adding stuff. So so we are very versatile. We look at what the customer wants rather than try and put them into a box. Everybody talks about we're out of the box. We're very much that way, you know. Do what you want to do rather than what the software is going to tell you to do.
Yeah, I can see that. You can, once you start on the journey, then it just grows and grows and grows.
I love that part of software. It's as much as you think it's some sort of digital thing, you know, and everybody sort of a little computer aware, don't switch. I remember my dad, he was before computers, he couldn't switch it on. He was crazy. He didn't want a computer. And software has an organic life of its own. I love it. It's just amazing how it relates to everything we do. And we're just becoming more digitally aware, even for us old bullies in the system, I suppose. You eventually can't get away from it.
Yeah. So if someone's got an existing system or they're using some other software or database, is it easy? I imagine it will be easy to migrate to.
Well, yes, I've spent, this is a problem you have. People are on existing legacies that they can't get away from. They're locked into things. They're stuck with them. And there's a number of things that happen in that space. But migrating, in our business, we just say to people, migrate for free. I'm not going to charge you. Come on the software, use what you can. It's all there. It's not a specific thing. We'll tailor make it for you. Work with it. If you see that there's value in it after 2 or 3 months or after 30 days, we don't put a timeline on it. Well, then let's go down the road and tweak it to suit your environment or the circumstances of the way you work. But at the same time, it's very easy to build layers these days that allow other third-party pieces of software to engage with the stuff you've got or with your back end or with what you're doing to drive the process. To give you an idea, there's a word in the industry, if anybody goes back, called green screen. And green screen is the old IBM legacy systems that sit there. Most of the big banks and insurance companies and that were put on big mainframes 25 or 30 years ago. And they can't get out of those systems. They can't. The organizations are run on those old green screens. You know, you go to the bank and you see the woman in the bank. She's going to look up your information. These days, you just need to put a piece of information in, like my name or my date of birth or my postcode, and whoop, all my information's there. On a legacy system, it's built in tiers in a silo, the old IBM way, and those large companies are stuck. And we've worked quite hard at being able to go into a place like a large bank, or they don't have to be large, an organization, insurance company, and say, all right, you can't move out of the legacy system that you've got because you're too scared you're going to lose your data and your information, massively important for them. But why don't we start a process of onboarding and putting a layer between the legacy system and what you're doing, giving you the new world interface of being able to work like everybody else does in the new world now. And we've done that. And what we've happened to do is, after about 18 months of transformation or migration, they eventually switched the IBM systems off. And they've come out of a hardware nightmare because those systems cost a fortune to keep running. And so those are much bigger projects, but they're not really. They're just understanding where the pain points are and working your way through them. And the same applies for small businesses. The same applies to all of Natalie's clients. It's exactly the same. Mine's just one of those steps in the process. I'm the engine that's doing the SOE somewhere in the middle of it in a different way. But the digital journey and making it easy for the client, always our focus. It wasn't when I came into the business, it was all about tech. And tech drives this and tech. But it's taken a while, almost 3 years, to change the nature of how the business thinks into what is the user experience. Always we argue, we sit in these tech processes where we work out how we're going to make this piece of software work, and my argument is always stop. I know you want to do it that way, but how is the user going to experience the process? Most important these days.
Yeah.
And like Natalie says, 3 seconds of TikTok, boy, Tinder, swipe left, swipe right, swipe up and down. And even when you're working with working software, people that are working on it, if it's not easy for them, they go back to an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Then I'm back in Microsoft world, and they're my antichrist. So.
I think they're all about antichrist. Really.
How many times do you guys swear at Outlook when you've loaded it and then it's got an attachment and you get the wheel of death? Anybody phoned Microsoft and asked them why it takes so long to do that? We can't. They'll just tell us to bugger off. So.
I call it the circle of doom. Well, that's amazing. That was really interesting, Craig. Has anyone got any questions?
Yeah, Ramesh.
Hi, Craig. That's really interesting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, fully. Yes.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because in a way, it sounds to me like a sort of form of passive surveillance, your work. And it can either be aggressive or passive, dependent on
yes.
That's
a very interesting approach. Yes.
Yeah. What would you say has been your biggest disaster to date, and how did you remedy it?
My biggest disaster to date was thinking that I could do everything and we had software that was capable of solving all the problems. It was, yes, we do have it, 3,000 odd, 3,500 models or modules sit in there that probably can do almost anything. But sitting in front of a client and saying, yes, I can do that, yes, I can do that, we've done that before, they don't believe you. And you can believe in yourself and know you can do it, but they don't believe. And that's the disaster that took me later in this business evolution to understand that I had to distill out of this. When I was referred to, we built this elephant over 25 years. You can't eat an elephant. You can eat an elephant at a bite at a time. And really what we really did was go back into our own business and solve it by distilling out from 3,000 modules to just 2. And we took those 2 to market. Just 2. They have some complex things on the back, and they will move into other pieces of software where we'll draw down from them and the learnings we've got from them. but taking into the market the most simple message, especially in the software space. Simple stuff. And they exist as internal words as RSVP and plan. Your people work within that's an internal word, but RSVP, managing people in that environment, and planning what you do with them on the precinct. I talked about people and precinct. And we distilled this monster down to just two things, people and precinct. And it applies to everything you do, you know, in a business, in the police force, in the NHS, or whether it be an event that you're doing at a festival, for a music festival, for a vegan, I'm busy with something which is a vegan food festival, quite interesting. So it's about just managing people and place. It's as simple as that. But it didn't, that metamorphosis in our own business took 3 years to distill out till we really knew what we were trying to do in the disaster we had on our hands, which was just too big and too much, built over a legacy of 25 years down to something extremely simple that people can understand. I hope that answers it, but that's where we are at the moment. And it's proving to be successful.
Thank you.
Must have got something. We've worked it out. And it took some time. You get cluttered with everything else, you know. I always say, John, my partner, I always say, John, when you're up to your arse in alligators, you forget your original intention was to drain the swamp. You know, you're busy dealing with everything else in business that you don't think about what you're doing with your own business. Yeah. Thank you. Cool question, but it is a difficult space. Anything else? Anybody else got a question?
We've got time for one very quick, because I'm just conscious of where we are on the clock this morning. So quick question, quick answer. I mean, I suggest if anybody wants to discuss this more with Craig, then have a
yeah, don't be, even the smallest businesses, sometimes I met 2 Greek guys last night that build stages for musicals and shows. And they are struggling to manage that process. And it's very easy from a facilities management to manage even the building of a set for a stage. You know, it's not, you don't have to be a big organization to be able to manage the processes and the things you do. You can build very small, quick, or even use big systems down to small process that can make it much easier for you.
I was going to say,
thank you, Craig. That's very, very interesting.
And if I just before I sign off, Natalie, I'll give you a shout.
Yeah, if you can write on through the chat.
Thanks very much for the opportunity.